I actually looked at next week's beginning of the Gemara, and we actually have the next few lines from Tan Rabbanim till the two dots is kind of back to what we is part of our general discussion. And then we have two dots where we're going to move on to the next part of the Mishnah, which means that if you realize we went on this huge tangent, we started talking about Pesach, then we started about Kiddush, and then we started talking, then we just went off the rails with a Kiddush and Abdullah and wine and beer and all that stuff, right? But just to remind you guys, we are studying Tractate Pesachim, which is about Pesach, right? So next week, after many, many weeks, we will once again start learning about Pesachim, about Pesach, instead of the constant derailment, which is very common in the Talmudic way of doing things, is that, continue. Okay, so we started off with Rav Huna that says that once you tasted something, which means if you ate anything Friday night, you no longer can make Kiddush. You have to wait till the next day and only make Kiddush the day after. Okay? That was statement number one. Based on that statement, we have Rav Chana Bar Chinona ask Rav Huna, what about Havdalah? Is Havdalah the exact same rule, or is Havdalah the exception to the rule? Omar Loi tells him, he basically says, I actually say, Rav Huna is saying, I say that this is not a problem for Havdalah, but Rav Ashi says otherwise. Then you had a story of somebody that actually went to Rav Asi, not Rav Ashi, Rav Asi, and he actually ate something by accident, and yet he made Havdalah, and his wife is like, something's wrong here, what on earth are you doing? And he told his wife, leave the guy alone, there is another rabbi that he is holding like. All right, that's a little story, and that's that. And then we just brought you a whole bunch of different things, right? We brought you Rav Yosef that says you don't make Kiddush and you don't make Havdalah. Rabba Omar Rav Nachman, he says that Shmuel says otherwise, so you have an argument as to what Shmuel's opinion is. Okay? In Judaism, you can have an argument as to what the argument is, right? They say 2 Jews, 3 opinions. How's there 3 opinions? There's only 2 Jews. I would say the other way. How's there only 3 opinions if there's 2 Jews? There should be more. Because you have yes, no, maybe, and depends, and machlokes. That's already 4. Right? Good. So over here we had an argument as to what is the opinion of Shmuel. You had an argument between Rav Yosef and Rabba in the name of Rav Nachman. All right? Rabba then comes and gets involved and says that the halacha is that you still make Kiddush and you still make Havdalah even if you ate or drank something. You still continue and do Havdalah. All right? That's that. Good. We had a bit of an alternative wording of Rava, which Ameimar said. Ameimar suggested an alternative wording of Rava. What was the difference between Ameimar's version of Rava and the initial version of Rava? Through Sunday or through Tuesday? All right? However, you see the Gemara seems to ignore Ameimar's opinion and seems to be that you could make Havdalah all the way through Tuesday. Yeah? Yeah. Then we got into the whole thing with beer, right? You like beer? You ever drank beer before? No, never drank beer. You drank beer before?
Yeah.
Yeah? How does it taste?
It's not my favorite.
Not your favorite? What's wrong with you, man? What kind of man are you?
Oh, he's a good Jew. Kiddush on wine, not beer.
Good. It's true. Okay, so we had beer in the time of the Talmud was not the type of beer we had. The type of beer we have today would be called in the time of Talmud, it would be called barley beer.
Malt licky.
Huh?
Malt licky?
What?
Malt licky.
What's malt licky?
Malt liquor. Liquor.
No, but liquor usually that's distilled. This is not distilled.
I know this isn't still yet.
I don't know how. Does you have any idea? You're into science. You have any idea how you actually how do you ferment? How do you make alcohol?
Well, the yeast breaks down the sugar and the carbohydrates.
Yeah.
And the waste product of the yeast is ethanol.
So we're basically eating the piss of the yeast.
Yeah.
Okay. That's what we're like. Oh, huh?
Yeah.
All right.
Alcohol
Yeah, but
concentration
so
depends
let
on
me
the
ask you:
yeast
if we took a bunch of grapes, right? We smashed them. Well, does that yeast there automatically? Do we have to add the yeast?
Yeah, it's on your feet, on your hands, in the air.
There's yeast everywhere.
Yeah, but it may not necessarily be the kind of yeast that you want. You could end up
Right.
making poison instead of.
How do you change the alcohol percentage? By fermenting it longer or shorter?
Yeah, or you also have to use yeast. So the thing is, normally the alcohols, as it ferments, the yeast will multiply and the alcohol concentration goes up until it hits the point that it's toxic for the yeast, and then all the yeast die. Unless you have you have to have a certain type of yeast, and you have to have certain levels of stuff in the thing. And then
So,
the yeast
but how do I
percentage.
put it this way? Let's forget about grapes because I think grapes somehow they have natural yeast, no?
Yeah.
But what about like barley? What barley has yeast? What do I do with it? I soak it in water and all of a sudden it starts fermenting?
It would. Yeah, it would just start fermenting.
I don't have to do anything.
But
I just soak the barley in water and then all of a sudden I'm getting beer.
Yeah, but it's also going to be full of bacteria and other things. You can make sure that it's just the yeast doing the majority of it if you add a bunch of yeast.
So you add
yeast anyway, but there's also going to be other stuff.
So people usually add yeast when they're making these things?
Making beer.
Yeah, what in the olden days? In the olden days, how did they do it? I mean, in the olden days, they didn't have like yeast. They didn't have like chemicals, and so how did they make beer?
The yeast would come in from the environment, or maybe they would have something called a mother culture. Like they would have a old beer that is full of yeast, and then dump a little bit of it in the.
And that would kind of get it going.
Maybe that could be, or it's just on your hands, on your clothes, on your skin. There's yeast everywhere.
Huh?
It's like bacteria.
You should YouTube how they made beer. But yeah, they used to do it. DIY. Yeah.
Yeah, naturally.
Yeah. Like which fruit? All fruits. So I don't have to do anything. I just put it in. I just take a bunch of apples and I let them just sit there, and all of a sudden I'm gonna get or let's say I squeeze apple juice. I squeeze apple juice. I squeeze apple juice and I just leave it there. It's gonna become alcoholic.
If you use the right temperature and environment.
Yeah.
I mean, I've initially gotten to the shop to buy fruit before it was
And you ate it and you got high.
When I got home,
Yeah.
tasted it and it tasted like pop.
And so it got you high. And you got high. You got high from eating the apple. I know that. Good. All right. Well, again, in the olden days, the general beer was date beer. However, as we quote in the Gemara, some people made it out of berries, some people made it out of barley, and some people made it out of figs. Right? And however, when you said beer regular, it was talking about date beer. If you said barley beer, then obviously it was barley beer. Today, it's the opposite. When you say beer, you're usually talking about barley beer because that's what they use. Barley and hops. Hops. I don't know what that is even. Is that another type of barley? What is it in the hops? Huh? Huh?
I'm not sure. I think it's the flower of the seven tree.
Makes it taste beer like beer. And how does it get like fizzy? Like that, again, could be that it has fizzy, but the question is, how do they keep the fizz? How do you keep the fizz? Or do they add fizz to it just to make it taste? I don't know. It's weird. I was wondered how this was. Anyways, the fact is that back in those days there were prestigious drinks that were used for kiddush, for these various ceremonies, and the question is, are we allowed to use these? We've actually went back and forth with numerous opinions. Back and forth. Some rabbis said you could. Some rabbis said you can't. Some people say for Havdalah you could, but not for Kiddush. And then one rabbi said that if it's if the guy was really mamish making money off of it, it was like his business. So because it meant so much to him, therefore he could make kiddush on that. And that's pretty much the entire quota of the week in a synopsis, summary, etc. And can I know how to? Put it this way? Did anybody over here finish the entire quota, reading it inside the Gemara without their sheets? Don't all tell me at once.
No.
No one finished it.
Wasn't going for that.
I wasn't going for that. How much did you end up doing? Half at least?
Let's see how far I get today. Huh?
Right? All right. It's very important that you read it in the Gemara after you do it on your sheets, because otherwise, when you're going to come to me, you're not going to be able to read it. And if you're not going to be able to read it, that means that you did not advance the way you could have and should have in this week. Right? Are you here in yeshiva to be entertained? Or are you here to grow and to not need the yeshiva anymore as a crutch to your study of Torah? That's the question you have to ask yourself in your brains. What's the answer? You want to be a person that for the rest of your life, you're going to need a rabbi to explain to you every detail of the Jewish literature. Yeah? Is that your goal? No. The goal is that you should be the rabbi. You should be giving the lecture. Right? They're bored of me already, the people online here. They're like, let's get another rabbi out there. Right? You guys have to take me over. Huh?
Like being able to make kiddush.
Yeah.
Like if you brew beer or you still
Yeah.
you're also going to make kiddush on it because you make it because you feel that it's something important.
Again, it has to, when you're making kiddush on a cup, you're trying to show a value to that ceremony. Okay? The value is that you're taking a prestigious drink and you're making a blessing on a prestigious drink in honor of the ceremony. Yeah.
So I was just thinking, because if it's your own company that you sell, like
if what?
Sell, if it's your own company,
yeah,
that you sell the beer or whiskey or whatever it is, then let's say like just so happens that you accidentally made a bad batch.
Yeah.
So then you taste it during kiddush, and then you feel like, oh my gosh, the entire batch is bad. I have to like recall this. And now all of a sudden.
So you're saying, oy vey, well, first of all, if you're gonna use your own product for Shabbat, I would assume you're using a complete product, and a complete product should be already tasted.
Yeah, but sometimes things go wrong. I mean, like, I think it was 2 weeks ago.
Do you think a winemaker doesn't taste the wine? As a matter of fact, when I was in New Zealand for a while, I was in New Zealand, and like everybody in the company was constantly like a little tipsy because everybody was like taking a sips of the wine.
I was in like 2 weeks ago, right? I opened a bottle of wine, and it just so happened that it wasn't bottled correctly, or something went wrong with
Yeah.
production. So it was bad. It was a bad luck bottle of wine.
Right. That one bottle was bad and the other ones weren't?
Yeah. It was three. I bought 3 bottles, all from the same company.
Yeah. From the same line.
Yeah.
So that probably had to do with the bottling.
Right. So
Probably didn't have to do with the actual batch. It probably was bottled.
Since I bought that from a different company that's not my own,
Yeah.
it's like, well, okay, I made bad purchase. But if I owned the company and I opened that bottle of wine, now
you're thinking about work.
I'm thinking about my business during Shabbat, and I'm thinking like, wow, now I need to recall the entire batch, and I need to stop selling it and take it and buy it, whatever. Now all of a sudden, I'm thinking about business in Shabbat.
Good question. It's a good question.
Yeah.
He's basically saying, why aren't we worried that he might, first of all, we didn't necessarily say that he was using his own product. But you're saying if you're using your own product, it could be that issue. First of all, I would suggest again, if you're using your product, you would have tasted it before Shabbos to ensure that it is in fact worthy of drinking, right? You a finished product, you end up tasting it to make sure it worked out properly, right? Now, if you're going to tell me there was a bottling issue, so that would be an issue with just this one little bottle here. Yeah. Good. He says we still enjoy New Zealand wine. I said, I don't know if he had the one that I don't know if they make the. When I was there, they made one. They had one kosher run in the whole New Zealand. What was the name of the company? I forgot. Goose Bay. It's called Goose Bay. Goose Bay is the name. You might still even be able to find that wine in some Jewish stores, probably outside of Israel. Because in Israel, because there's so much Israeli local wine production, it's not that easy to find kosher wine that ships into Israel. It's very often like it's hard for them to compete. Whereas if you go outside of Israel, so for them to ship from New Zealand or from Israel is almost the same thing. You'd say even America, which is much closer to Israel, but by the time you put it on a ship, it's not doesn't make a major difference in costs. Oy what? What are you oyveying about? All right, good. Anyways, we did not cover a lot of Rashi's and Rashbams, but let's go through one Tosfos, and then I'm going to let you guys go, and then I'm going to call you over one by one and see how well you can read, see how far you went. Yeah, good. The Tosfos over here, we see it at the end. Yesterday, we spoke about a person who says, I will swear in public that I will never drink, that he says he's never going to drink beer, right? Rav Yosef. Now, why is he saying he would swear in public? What's the difference between swearing in public and not swearing in public? What doesn't count? Says who? If you swear not in public, you don't have to keep your a neder has to be in public? No, absolutely not. A person can make a vow not in public. Yeah, you don't have to. Huh? Says who? No. So first of all, to cancel a vow, you can either have one major rabbi or three more less senior rabbis. They could cancel a vow.
My grandfather made a vow when he was in yeshiva.
Yeah.
He's not going to have mushrooms.
It's not going to have mushrooms. Yeah.
So now he doesn't have mushrooms.
Till today.
He said that if he wants to take it off, he'll have to get three
And he doesn't want to do that, so he just doesn't eat mushrooms. The question is, how does he know if there's mushrooms inside of a product? He looks at every product at the ingredients to see if there's mushrooms. Why did he make a vow not to eat mushrooms?
Because he said in his shiva all the buffer and did something that they didn't think that they said it's not important. He said that the yeshiva in his days, I think they still do it.
What do they do?
That they make a vow. The bacher make a vow, and each bacher makes a different vow. That they're not going to do something.
That's dangerous.
I've never heard of such a thing. I'm sorry to tell you, but never heard of such a thing. All right, but could be they used to do it.
What's your
Now,
You're talking about the.
So we're talking about the difference between
and private.
Okay, so if a person makes a vow, generally, if a person makes a vow, it is not based on what you actually said, it's actually based on what you meant to say. So if you say something that sounds like something else, it really goes on based on what you meant to say. It's not based on what other people think you said. No, I'm sorry. However, if you make a vow in public, there is certain opinions that say that if you make a vow in public, which means in front of 10 people or more, at that point, according to this opinion, you could no longer absolve the vow. However, there are opinions that say not that if you actually say the vow in public, but if you say the vow is on the intention of the public, which means that you're not making a vow based on your own perception of what you're saying, but you're making a vow based on the perception that the other people think you're saying. Now that changes, right? So if you are saying a vow based on the perception of the public, then the vow is not what you thought the vow was. The vow is what other people would think that your vow meant. So if you misworded yourself, you have to follow the vow as other people understood it, not as you thought that it was going to be. Yeah? Good. Makes sense?
Yeah.
Good. So there is a machloikis. Some people say that the very fact that this in public means it can never be absolved. Some people say no, that's only if you do it with the intention of the public, then it can't be absolved. Rabbi Yosef obviously held he held that once you did it in public, you could no longer absolve the vow. All right? Good. And so that is pretty much the Tosfos, the small Tosfos over here that we have, Adur Barabim. And with that, we're going to complete this week's Gemara. We will also remind you guys that we're going Bezrat Hashem at around 4 o'clock. We are leaving to the Baba Sali. If you didn't organize your trip, call Shammai. There might actually be some cancellations. You booked in? You booked in. Right? Good. We're going to have a lot of partying, Bezrat Hashem. I just hope I'm feeling a little better because I wasn't feeling, Why? What's wrong with too much partying? Why not? Partying for a good reason is good. Partying just because you want to get drunk and do crazy stuff, that's not it's meaningless. All right, good. We're going to see you in a few minutes. I'm going to call guys over to read, and we'll see you then, and we'll see you again when we are at the Baba Sali, Be'ezrat Hashem. See you later. Sei gesund. Zell. Close this thing. Whoa.